Welcome back, everybody, to a plaid edition of Between Two Sermons.
Well, I guess it is end of September.
That's right. So we're getting into flannel season.
Right.
I haven't quite embraced flannel yet, but I'm almost there, halfway there, gone plaid. So great to be back with you all again. We're talking through Daniel. We made our way all the way to chapter 3 of Daniel right now. Right. And this sermon, Rob, has a lot to do with people who are walking through trials.
Yeah, right.
And as you and I know, we have a lot of opportunities to talk with people within our church. Probably many of you are walking through a season of trial right now. And so I think this is really applicable for a lot of us.
Yeah.
But before we even get into chapter 3, I think it'd be great for people to have an understanding of what are some of the sources you're using.
No, good. We've been talking about them. Just quickly, I'm going to mention a few that you might find interesting from sort of the heavy to the light. This book, N.T. Wright on Exile, it's a big book, but really it's based on an essay that he wrote that's only about 80 pages. I would highly recommend it if you're really interested in not just Daniel, but Exile. And then the rest of the book, which you could read or not read, is commentary. But it's an excellent article about and then book about the idea of exile. This is the commentary, very accessible. The one Pete interviewed Tremper Logman, the author, 2 weeks ago. You could listen to that, but this is very accessible if you, as an individual or even a small group, but if you, an individual, wanted to go a little deeper. It's it's called application commentary. It's really
the NIV application.
Yep. So it's really focused on that. This is a series done, I think, by the Gospel Coalition, if I'm not mistaken. It's very simple. Daniel for you, then they have Ephesians for you, and John for you. It's very accessible, small chapters, but good, meaty. I would recommend it. And this book is actually, maybe this is even good for anybody, but maybe even for families or parents. Faith for Exiles, 5 Ways for a New Generation to Follow Jesus in a Digital Babylon. So it is talking about this idea of exile, but really talking practically about how to manage your faith, manage your time. So all good books, if you find some of those helpful, I would enjoy.
Yeah, I think that last one, especially Faith for Exiles, if people are looking to just go, hey, how could I translate biblical things to this current age that we're at, that one is really good. I read that one too.
Nice.
That's very good.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, there you go.
So we're in Daniel chapter 3, like we said, and today we're looking at Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, their journey along with Daniel. Yeah. And King Nebuchadnezzar has just set up this huge idol, and he said 90 feet tall, 9 feet wide, and he's saying to everybody, bow down to this thing. Right. And they have this crisis of faith, like, are we going to obey the king or are we going to obey God? And that is the position that they find themselves in. Now, you said again, this is an opportunity for us to go behind the scenes a little bit. You had said in the sermon that the image that Nebuchadnezzar set up may not have been Nebuchadnezzar. I always thought it probably was.
It seemed common sense because the one in chapter 2, we even had an artist rendering last Sunday of in church. If you were here last Sunday, it's a statue and it says "You are the head of gold." So in a sense, you could say it was a statue of him. But at least from what I'd read in some commentaries, it said it was God's plural and that no king in the history of the Babylonian Empire, it wasn't their style to like maybe in the case of the Roman Empire, people thought Caesar was a god, Julius Caesar, but that was not the case in Babylon. They certainly were autocratic and the divine right of kings, but they did not see themselves. So at least that's what they said. Gotcha. But the big idea, either way, which does make sense to the chapter, I think you could prove, is the real goal, whether it's Nebuchadnezzar or just a god, a consolidation of the Babylonian gods. It's really designed almost as a way to build a certain coalition, because what was true in Babylon, probably true in the Roman Empire as well, was there was all these conquered peoples, and these conquered peoples, just like the Jews, they had their own value system, their own ideas, and even their own culture, and of course their own faith. And it wasn't what was unique about Babylon, different than maybe some other cultures we could think of. But as we understand it, they weren't trying to completely indoctrinate everybody to relearn a certain way of life, as much as they wanted to assimilate them, and said, as long as we can keep you loyal to us, what you do in your own house is your own business. We don't care if you work, because they were polytheists anyway. If you worship, the God of your old country, we don't care, as long as you do what we ask.
Also, throw this in there.
So I think the big idea here was, verse 7, it mentions people from all different nations. That we didn't read it in the sermon. But that they were really trying to say, how do you keep together a group of people with so many various ideas and points of view? And part of this, so you could say Nebuchadnezzar perhaps wasn't a very religious man, who maybe was, but it doesn't seem like it. Right. And that really this sort of religion, this sort of world religion, was really a way to try to keep people on the same page and to be kept in control, almost like they would do in, I don't want to mention countries, but China or something. I mean, where you're trying to say, how do I keep people loyal to the leader?
Yeah. And so you're saying your first point out the gate is expect to be tested.
Yes, and I think that's so important. And it, in some ways, when I was just thinking about it, I mentioned Abraham because it was easy, but if you really rethink the whole Bible, from Abraham, David, the prophets, into the disciples, etc., everyone's being tested. And sometimes we look at tests as a negative thing, right? But there's a negative way of thinking of testing, like I'm trying to make you fail, right? Right. My boss wants me to fail. My friend wants me to fail. But test, really, in this case, and in many places, Abraham tested, God tested Abraham. That's a verse of scripture. Jesus tested the disciples, John 6, to see what they would do about the feeding of the 5,000. In cases like that, it's a constructive thing. You're trying to help somebody grow. And so if faith is about trust in God, if faith is about depending on God, it's about doing something through God's power and not your own, it has to be tested. So I think that's a key point.
Yeah, that's an interesting point that you just made, because even Jesus was tested.
Yeah, Jesus himself.
Jesus himself was tested.
In all ways, like we, yet without sin. That's a verse of scripture.
And then the temptation out into the wilderness.
That's exactly
the devil tested Jesus. It was like he was put through this temptation to test his response. Yeah. And he came through, of course, with flying colors. Right. But even Jesus was not exempt from this.
That's right. That's good. I didn't think of that. It's a great point.
Yeah. And in the midst of that testing, then our temptation can be to look inward and to think, how am I going to muscle my way through it? Or how am I going to do what I need to do, especially in our kind of society where
self-sufficiency, whatever.
Yeah. But your second point is let God be God.
Yeah. I think this, I wouldn't be the first to think it, because it's such a unique passage of scripture, 16, 17, 18, is really not only the heart of this chapter, but I would say a key principle about faith. When they say, I kind of read the verse in halves to stress the point. King, God will deliver us, so have at it, throw us in the fire. But then I think it's verse 17 says, but if he doesn't, we're going to go in anyway. Yeah. And I think the sentence I use, I may have borrowed it from a book, is, they were confident of God's abilities. That's a key thing. Do I believe that God can do whatever he wants to do? He could change the situation. He could change the world. He could save a friend. God can do anything. He's all powerful, but I'm not so sure of his purposes, because we see this all the time in our lives. Why did God, my friend get healthy and I didn't? Yes. Why did they get the promotion? I didn't. Why did someone, have a child and whatever the case may be, whatever our tests are, God hears our prayers. God is capable. It's true. I think God is capable of doing any of the things that we would want him to do. But his purposes
Yeah.
He doesn't, we're not, it's above our pay grade. How unsearchable are his ways, and his ways are not our ways. And he's doing something larger. And even earlier, we said this in the very first sermon of the series, that he says, I have you here when 70 years are finished, wait for it, for Babylon, he says to the exiles, then I'll bring you home. Right. In that one sense, he's saying, listen, I want to bless you here, but this isn't for you.
Yeah.
I have another purpose. Just like Nebuchadnezzar might have been part of the purpose, or the empire, when they heard about the exploits or the deliverance of God in the case of these 3 men in this furnace. So that is so important.
Yeah. Yeah, and to believe that God can deliver us. Sometimes, I mean, that in and of itself is something, a real step of faith.
Yeah.
I'm convicted of that even as I pray for people or whatever who are experiencing going through a test of one kind or another, to even as I pray for them, am I believing in this moment that God can actually answer this prayer?
That's right.
He won't always answer everyone, but do I have a posture of faith that actually believes that actually this prayer could work?
And I think what's helpful, I think you're right. I mean, I think we all fall, I do, and without saying the words out loud, that I'm not sure I really believe what I'm saying or praying.
Yeah.
But I think the idea that to let God be God, this captured in this quick phrase, but if not, to hold those together, to know the second helps me live out the first. That is to say, to know that God's purposes are his own, and therefore he doesn't act in a predictable, kind of simple way like he's a machine. That allows me the room to not tie my conviction that God is able to do anything by whether or not I've seen him deliver in this or that time for me or for friends. So I carry these together. I recognize we could sit down on one piece of paper and write times where we really believe that God has done kind of a miracle of a kind, and it's been blown your mind in somebody's life or your own life. But then we could write on another piece of paper kind of the pros and cons, times when we really thought it was going to happen and we really believed it was going to happen, and it happened to the lives of other people, but it didn't happen here. So these hold together because we need to acknowledge God can do everything, but always remember that God is not a machine, and he has his own purposes, and in some of these things we will not know until we're on the other side.
Yeah. And that's the important part for it, and to look for God in those times of trouble. I think that's your final point.
I think that's, there's that song, we sing it sometimes, the fourth man in the fire, and someone was saying recently, does somebody know what that means? It's a good question. But I think it's such an important point that later is developed in more mature theology that perhaps Nebuchadnezzar and these men didn't even get. But the big point is, God could have solved their problem, that is Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, another way. He could have just helped them survive without ever having getting in that fire. But the point is, he allowed them to go into that fire, and then he or an angel, however you interpret it, was with them in the fire. So think of what it would mean. Let's pretend you're them, or imagine you're these men. What would it have done to your faith?
Right.
Not just for God solved your problem, because he could have solved the problem having never gone in there. He could have killed Nebuchadnezzar. He could have just moved you somewhere. He could have changed the king's mind. But he throws you into the fire. Now you're walking out. And as it says in that last verse or two, you know you were there. You know that you never felt any heat. Your clothes aren't even singed. What would that do to your faith?
Right.
To know, and whatever your understanding of the fourth man was, you knew it was from God.
Yes.
That had to be really a powerful lesson.
Yeah, and you brought up this at the very end, like that's a pre-incarnate version of Jesus.
Certainly seems the way.
I kind of read it that way anyway.
Yeah.
And if that's a pre-incarnate version of Jesus, like he's tipping something for us. He's showing us the way forward.
True now.
Yes.
Yeah, because I'm not in heaven today, obviously. That's not the way our faith works. It's already not yet, as theologians like to say. So then how do I live my faith today? How do I live heaven on earth today? Thy kingdom come. I do it because I bring Christ into my troubles.
Right.
I invite him in. Sometimes he'll deliver me out of this or that, but where I find my faith is its strongest when I invite and recognize Christ in my trouble.
Isn't it amazing, the end of the Great Commission, what Jesus says, behold, I am with you even to the end of the age. And I think that promise there, that Jesus is with us.
That's it.
That's the whole thing.
Yeah. He doesn't say, I'm going to get you out of your troubles between now and the end of your life.
Right. But he says, I will be with you.
Yeah,
I'm
huge.
with you.
Yeah.
And I think that's the one to cling on to, no matter what kind of trouble we're walking through in our life. So that's a great way to try to apply this to our lives, is what are you currently walking through? And where do you feel like maybe this is testing my faith? Whether you feel like this is a test from God or it's just a circumstance in your life, what are you walking through that you feel like my faith is being tested right now? And that's a great thing to kind of openly share with others. If you're in the context of a small group, that would be a great thing to share. And then what would it look like for Jesus to meet you in the midst of that test? For you to invite him into it and to trust him more fully in that. That would be a fantastic conversation, I think.
Amen.
So thanks again, Rob.
Yeah.
We appreciate it. We won't be back here next week because Pastor Juan will be delivering the message. And just so you know, don't look for us back here next week, but we'll see you the week after on Between Two Sermons.